Ooh, I really like that big dong you got there. What is going on, my beautiful LARPers and LARPettes? Today we're going to go over something really cool. I think it's really cool. Hopefully you guys think it's really cool if you're watching this. These are from Atlantic Firearms. They are made by Atlantic Arms Manufacturing, so they're sold exclusively through Atlantic Firearms. And RPK and their battlefield pickup right here, and I'll get into why that's called a battlefield pickup. First of all, my relationship with Atlantic Firearms is pretty much they just gave me a discount on these two. I did purchase them with my own money, so there was no payment involved for me to make this review at all. Just my discount, and that's it. Now, I'm not going to bore you too much on the details on the AK platform, just because I know there's hundreds of videos out there on YouTube getting into the history on these type of rifles here. There's a guy on YouTube called Mishiko. I've seen his videos. He does a really good explanation on the history and what the key differences are between all the various type of AKs and AK brands and all that stuff. But I'm just going to get into these two specifically from Atlantic Firearms and basically point out just small differences and point out the build quality on the two and how my experience has been shooting these two. Now, right off the bat, guys, these are built off of Romanian parts kits. This one is a 1972 parts kit, and this one is a 1967 parts kit. So this one is a tad bit older. And those of you that are potentially looking at buying your first AK, don't be afraid of looking at parts kits built AKs, parts kit built AKs. AKs that are built from parts kits. So just as long as they are a reputable builder, I wouldn't be too afraid of purchasing one. Obviously, I purchased these two, but those of you that are looking, just make sure that the builder themselves make a good AK. And I'm gonna kind of go over some of the little things here too as well on what makes a good AK a good parts built AK. And just a little tiny history on myself. I am no expert on the AK platform themselves, but I have built quite a few in my day. And for example, this Rifle Dynamics AK, I did take a 2-day build class for this one just recently, but I have built AKs in the past as well. Taking this class was definitely an eye-opener on some of the things that I didn't know and a lot of the questions I had, and hopefully I can give you guys some of the knowledge that I took from this class as well as some little tidbits here and there to help you make a decision on potentially purchasing one of these. Not these exactly, but just looking, if you're looking at something like this, hopefully I can help you out. Now, starting right at the front here, you do get a American made slant brake, and I put emphasis on the American made because unfortunately when parts kits come into the US builders have to put US parts on them to make them compliant with the import laws. Unfortunately, that's what you have to do. It's stupid, I hate it, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do in order for us to get some cool stuff, I guess. On the RPK, you do have a bigger, fatter barrel than the AK47 here. This one is longer than the AK47 as well. On this RPK, you have a 1 in 10 twist Green Mountain barrel, and on the AK, you have a 1 in 10 twist Mossberg barrel. You do have a bipod right at the front of the RPK built in as well. That bipod is foldable. So aside from the slant brake and the barrel, there is another American made part on here, but I'll get into the details of that part once I start getting towards the end of the rifle. Starting with your first Romanian part here is the front sight block. And from my inspection, they do not look slanted or canted or whatever anted you want to call it. They are very nice and very straight. No issues with the front sight, as well as the rear sight. The rear sights on these two are elevation adjustable, but on the RPK here, you do have a windage adjustment, which is pretty cool that that's on there. And I believe that is a upgraded part on this RPK kit here. Now moving on back, you do have the original Romanian gas blocks, gas tubes, and rear sight blocks on both of these. And again, from inspecting these do not look beat up whatsoever. I mean, these Romanian kits are built to last, guys. The way they look, especially on this one, because this one is painted over, it looks basically new. On this one, obviously it looks older, but the quality is still really nice for being so old of a parts kit. Nice, and I don't want to offend you people that were born in 67 and 72, but never mind, you guys are old. Now, the wood on these are some of my favorite pieces here. This one here is all worn out, as you can see, which looks really damn nice. I love that worn out look. And as well on the RPK. So on the RPK has a little bit of a nicer finish than this Battlefield pickup here, but on this RPK they left the wood from the original kit. And if you can see on the back of the RPK stock, I do have a little bit of trench art there. I don't know if you guys speak that language there, but let me know what that says in the comments below if you do know what that says. Now the dust covers, the safety selectors, the bolts, the bolt carriers, the springs, those are all still Romanian parts. And I do want to mention that all of these parts from the kits on these two are matching. But when I did talk to Matt over at Atlantic Firearms, he did mention that they try their best to get all matching numbers on these parts kits, but unfortunately sometimes they can't get all matching, so they just get whatever they can to build for you guys. But upon inspection on these two, I didn't see anything major with the bolt carriers and the bolts. I didn't see any abnormal wear. I didn't see anything crazy. I'll put some video up of these two so you can see the actual bolts out of the guns. Again, these guns are old and they look fresh, guys. I love the way they look. Now, moving on to the receiver itself. The receiver, as you can see on the RPK and the AK, are a little different, right? So if you're looking at the front portion where the trunnion is on the receiver, you do have a bulge front portion on the RPK. You don't have one on the AK. And that is because, and again, this is for you guys that are new out there and don't know too much about the AK platform, the bulge trunnion on an RPK is basically to last longer under sustained fully automatic fire. Not saying that this AK can't do that, it's just saying this one will be able to handle a lot more heat than this one here. So you have a fatter barrel on the RPK and you also have a thicker receiver on it. Now, the receivers are the last American made part on these rifles here. This one is a Childers receiver, and this one is a Morrissey receiver. Morrissey, did I say that right? I wrote it down right here. Morrissey receiver on this one here. Two really great manufacturers of receivers. So if you are looking at actually getting a receiver for your parts kit, if you're going to build one yourself, look at Childers receivers for the RPK and look at Morrissey receivers for the AK. Those two make some great stuff. And I also want to mention on the receivers, the rivets are really nicely pressed. And the reason why I'm mentioning the rivets is because that becomes one of the weak points of a bad AK builder, right? I'm gonna bring in an AK and show you some B-roll footage of it, of how rivets should not be pressed, and compare them to the rivets that are on these guys here. When you do come across something like this, definitely inspect the rivets right off the bat. That's kind of like looking at a car, right? A used car. You go to buy a used car, you're checking it out, you see a dent here, you see a dent there, and you're kind of wondering who the hell was driving this car. Did they drive it right? If you've seen these dents, what's underneath the hood? On an AK, it's kind of similar. You're looking at the receiver, you're looking to make sure that it's all completely pressed correctly. You're not seeing any bulges in spots that you're not supposed to see bulges. You're seeing the rivets and making sure they're pressed down nicely. And you're just wanting to inspect the overall quality and how straight these sights look in conjunction with each other. You're trying to see the front sight matches up with the rear sight completely straight and not canted in a certain way. There's just a lot of things to look at when buying one of these, but usually the rivets and how canted something is going to tell you if it's a good quality or bad quality AK. Now, this is one of the things that you AK purists out there are going to see that is not historically correct on these two builds here. So Atlantic Arms Manufacturing and Atlantic Firearms tries to make them as historically correct as possible, but they do throw in some cool extras that I think are cool. They do come with these side rails here, and these are made, I don't know about this one here on this AK, but on the RPK that is made by, oh shoot, that is made by Definitive Arms. So this one is called their light rail. So even though this gun is heavy as hell, this light rail is lighter than the average side rail. And it's not light rail like a flashlight rail. They call it the Definitive Arms light rail. Light, like lighter, like balloons light, not light. Now, moving on down to the magwell portion here is another thing to check when you're looking at a AK. you do want to make sure that the magazines lock in there completely perfect. Some magazines have wobble, some magazines don't. This one has a tiny bit of wobble there. Usually my plastic magazines, I don't know where they're at, have less wobble than the metal magazines. But when you are checking out an AK, make sure that those magazines come in and out smoothly and aren't super tight tolerances on a metal one or a plastic one, because there are going to be different magazines out there, and some magazines are thicker than others, and some magazines don't like to go in some certain AK. So I would just double check and make sure magazines fit in there and come in and out perfectly fine. Same goes for the RPK. This one comes in and out nicely. Just to show you, comes boom, out, in. So no issues with the magazine, very nice. If you're looking at the right side of the receiver, you do have your safe and fire marking on the AK, and on the RPK, you have your safe, then your FA, if you know what that means, and your FF, which is basically semi-auto. Now let's talk about the coatings, guys. The coating on the RPK is a manganese phosphate with a Teflon top coat, and on the AK it's a little bit different. So on the barrel here and the receiver is a black oxide, but if you're looking at the actual Romanian parts that came in this parts kit, they are basically worn down from the original parts kit. So whoever owned this parts kit fully with their original Romanian barrel and all that stuff before they had to tear it apart and send it imported into the US, this is basically worn down from the individual or individuals who own this firearm in the past. So that is really cool that they didn't change any of that wear on this AK, and you could definitely tell on the right side of this compared to the left side. The left side is pretty much down to the raw metal compared to the right side of this dust cover here. I'm pretty sure that's because whoever had this most likely just had it rubbing against them when they were walking around, or they had it on a sling and it's just rubbing back and forth on their clothes to rub that coating off of there. And you can see as well on the gas block and the front of that front sight block that is definitely worn down. Now this is the reason why they call it a battlefield pickup, because they didn't want it to look like it was a new gun. They wanted to keep that old looking used up gun, right? And I personally like that look. I really wish that I would have got one of these RPKs in this battlefield pickup finish. But I do want to mention on the American made parts on the barrel and the receiver, they do try their best to wear down that coating from the factory. So this coating on this lower receiver on this AK is purposely worn down from Atlantic Firearms, so it can try to match the worn down look on the parts kit itself. All right, so I pretty much went over everything that I needed to go over on these Atlantic Arms builds. I know I kind of just skimmed through some of the details, but overall the build quality on both of these are great. I wish I had some go and no-go gauges so I can show you guys that the head spacing is perfectly fine, but I had no issues running these out there. I've had this one for about a year or so, maybe a little bit more, and I know I have around 1,500, maybe hitting close to 2,000 rounds on this one here. And this one here is around 600 to 700 rounds total. They've been completely reliable for me, no issues whatsoever. And who knows how many rounds have went through the original bolt carriers and gas blocks and all the original parts on this guy. So I would like to think that it's upwards of the tens of thousands, hopefully more. Now, I don't have a lot of negatives on these guns. I mean, they're made off of parts kits, they're older guns, so there's really nothing too much to complain about. The build quality seems really good. The only thing that I will mention is that this bipod wasn't really behaving for me. So this bipod kind of comes up like this, it hooks over. If I could do this right there, and it's supposed to click right onto this cleaning rod right at the bottom here, but mine does not stay there while firing, which I wish it did, but I mean, it is what it is. All AKs pretty much have their own personalities, and that's just the personality of mine. It's just a finicky little girl. Now, if you've been contemplating buying an RPK or an AK47, I'm just going to go out and say that I feel that you should probably buy an AK47 first before you do an RPK. It's not that it's a little bit more complex, it's just not as practical to have an RPK over an AK47. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the RPK. I love how big it is. I love that it has a bipod. I love a lot of things about the RPK. It's just not something for the average person to have as their first AK variant, right? You want something that's lighter. You want something that's more maneuverable. You want something that you can put a lot more accessories on. Basically, the AK47 is just a little bit more user-friendly than the RPK. The RPK is for those of you that are already into AKs and want to collect something nice and get something nice for yourself and own a little piece of history to yourself. It's just the RPK is a amazing firearm. I just don't think it should be your first AK that you purchase. Now, with that said, I know I'm talking about your first time purchases, but if you do have an opportunity to buy an RPK, buy it. I know I'm contradicting myself here, guys, but these are getting harder and harder to find every year that passes. Unfortunately, the parts kits are dwindling down, as well as any other parts kits for an AK-47, but you hardly see RPKs out there anymore, guys. So if you do come across a well-built RPK, snag that up if it's a good price. And I want to go on the prices as well. This one was running about $1,600 and this one was running about $1,300-$1,400. They're always fluctuating in price, guys, as time goes on. Parts kits get harder to find, like I said. So when they import them, sometimes the shipping costs a little bit more, sometimes the parts kit costs a little bit more, sometimes the rarity makes the prices go up. It just depends on what the market is looking like at that time. But regardless of the parts kits, the RPK rifle itself is getting more rare as time passes. A lot of people will look at a price and say, oh, they used to be this price back in whatever year. They're not gonna go down, guys. Regardless of whatever you say and how much you complain, the prices are not going to go down because they're just getting more rare. It's like there's a saying that says, I forgot where I heard it from. It goes, I wish you knew you were in the good old days before you actually left them. So basically, how do you know today, if you see one of these at this price, isn't going to be the good old days you're going to talk about 20, 30 years from now? You're going to look back 20, 30 years from now and look at this $1,600, $2,000 price or whatever they are nowadays and be like, damn, I remember when those were $1,600. For the last time I was going to buy one of these was like at $700 or something like that. So the more and more that time goes on, the more and more that I'm kicking myself in the ass for not buying things that I want to buy. So now every time that I get an opportunity and I know that I'm financially able to, because I know some of you guys out there that just want to go and buy shit, just go and buy shit and end up getting divorced and stuff like that. I'm not trying to get divorced from my wife. I want to buy cool shit, but also keep my family. But yeah, guys, don't pass up opportunities on RPKs just because they're a little bit expensive right now. Do your research on how they're built, on how the specific one you're looking at is built, because most likely you're not going to find this one specifically here. But if you do find one from a reputable company, I suggest snagging it. But again, also look at the market. Don't look at the market blindly right now and be like, oh, he just said buy one if I saw one. Like, don't buy one for $4 grand. Buy one at the market price at this certain time, basically. As far as this brand goes, I would say that they are legit and good to go. But that is just my opinion, and that is just based off of what I have here in front of me. There are plenty of other AK builders out there. Atlantic Firearms also sells a lot of different AK brands, so just go ahead and look at those. These do sell out really, really quick because they're usually priced pretty fairly. In my eyes. And also, guys, if you do want me to make a video on how to manipulate an AK, again, I'm just speaking to the newer generation that's watching the videos. You guys that are deeply into AKs don't even probably care about what I'm saying right now, but I just want to help out those new people that are getting into this world of guns. And especially since the AK is so popular, they're going to look at some of these. So if you do want me to make a video on how to manipulate an AK, just go ahead and let me know. I'll run the RPK, I'll run that, and I'll run a bunch of other AKs for you guys. Enough of my rambling, guys. I appreciate you all. Thank you for sticking around this video. I love you. Catch you in the next one.